Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to do the second part of the sewing of my shirt. I'm now going to start the assembling with my back. I'm going to take one of my yoke and assemble the wrong side of the shirt with one layer of my yoke with just a few millimeters smaller than my full seam allowance. And then I will put my second yoke and put it over and assemble this time with your normal seam allowance. Once both layers of your yoke is sewn to your back, to make sure you don't create pleat while pressing on one side, I suggest you do your pressing in two steps. First, seam allowance is down and one of the yoke is down, press. Then you go on the other side with all layers towards the top and you do your second pressing. After the pressing, you could do your top stitch, but I'm not doing it today. Then you're going to assemble the front piece to the yoke, and we're going to do it the same way we did for the back. The right side of the under yoke to the wrong side of the front shoulder. Sew them together on both sides. We are now ready to do the second seam. This is my good side of the fabric. I already did one of the seam and I'm going to show you how to make it clean outside and inside. You're going to fold your seam allowance of the yoke, place it over the seam, hiding it inside, and with your finger you're going to go grab all the seam allowance of the yoke and the bodice and you're going to pull it out. It will be a little hard to see what you're doing. After you did it once, you'll say, oh wow, that's it. So you're going to be able to assemble the seam straight like that, and of course you'll be able to turn it back on the right side. Now the seam is done. Look, you just have to pull it back and your seam is nice and clean outside and inside. You just need to do, if you want top stitch, you do your top stitch on the good side and a little final pressing. Now the next seam is going to be to assemble the sleeve to the bodice, and we're going to do it as a flat head sleeve, and this doesn't mean that the sleeve head is flat. This one has a normal sleeve head, but it means that we're going to assemble it flat. At the contrary, a set-in sleeve would be sewn at the underarm and the bodice side seam would be sewn. So the sleeve is set and we sew it to the armhole. In that case, it has to be done flat on the machine. So you place your garment flat and you put your sleeve over flat also. And you're going to assemble from one underarm point to the other underarm point, matching the armhole notch and the shoulder notch with the sleeve head. You're going to do your seam and overlock. Officially, there is no ease to the sleeve head, but it's possible you have like a 5 millimeter extra because of the way we did the pattern. So if you do have a little excess, just pull a little bit without breaking the thread. Just pull a little bit and distribute the ease in the seam allowance. That could help you for your sewing. Now both of my sleeves are sewn to the armhole. In case you wonder, your overlock should be done on the sleeve side, so the good side of the overlock on the sleeve. And the reason is that if you do want a top stitch at the armhole, it gives a little sporty look, you would send the seam allowance towards the bodice and do your top stitch on that side. And also you might want to look at shirt that you own. You'll see that sometimes it is done all the way, so from underarm to underarm. Some other time it's done just for the sleeve head area. So we would be ready to do the underarm seam, and you'll do it in one seam from the bottom of the shirt to the bottom of the sleeve. You do your both side seam and overlock. Remember that at the underarm, you should shift your seam allowance one in one direction, one in the other direction to eliminate the thickness. And usually when you're at the machine, you should send the under seam the direction where it's already sewn, so it'll be easier for you to control the top one going towards you. Our bodice is sewn. We did the side seam and the overlock. So we're now ready to do the collar at the neckline. But before doing that, I'm going to add an extra step that should have been in the preparation. It's a little stay stitch all around the neckline, about half of the size of the width of your seam allowance, so more or less 5 millimeter. And you're going to do it for two reasons. First, you want to attach the two layers of the yoke at the neck, so it's going to be considered as one. And the second is that very often the front neck stretch because it's a little biased. So this way you're going to stabilize your neck measurement. When it's done, you're going to place your shirt the way you want it when it's finished with your collar over. This is exactly the way it's going to be finished. It's a little confusing sometimes because you know that the top part of the fall of the collar is sewn to the inside of the stand collar. So it could be a little tricky here. So place them the proper way and then I'll tell you which one to assemble. We're assembling the inside of the stand collar to the wrong side of the neck. So you could place a little pin and go assemble from one hand to the other. Now the first seam is done. I hope you noticed that before sewing on both sides, I did place my bodice at the neck with a pin on both sides to make sure that this very corner is perfect. If there's any easing to do, it's going to be before, but not at the corner. We have one last seam to do. It's the top stitch. And to do perfect corner, since that's the most important and what shows the most, I have a little tip to give you that I think is my favorite. You're going to sandwich your neck seam allowance between the two stand collar pieces. So look at it like that. You're going to fold it, keep your seam allowance towards the side that it's sewn, and sandwich and sew as far as you can. Sandwich, make sure you don't grab any part of the collar, just sew your neck together. The result is going to give you a nice corner like that, already sewn for a little while. So it's going to be much easier for you to do the top stitch. And the top stitch will be done. Don't start at the corner. Again, you could start at center back since you have your reference. And just sew at 1 millimeter from the fold all around the stand collar. So the assembling is almost complete. We just have one more thing to do. It's to assemble the cuff to the bottom of the sleeves. And to do so, you're going to take your cuff and put the wrong side of the sleeve against the side that it's not folded yet. And you're going to sew from one side to the other with your normal seam allowance. I'll just pin it now. Then you're going to turn your cuff and do the final top stitch at 1 millimeter from the fold. I simply finish my assembling step by doing a nice pressing to my cuff. So that's it. Our second part is finished. You could now try it on, and make sure you're going to watch my next video. I'm going to show you how to do the finishing. So find the placement of your button and buttonhole, how to do them, and how to do even the little decoration and also the hem. Thank you for being there, and I see you next time.